I think Minot's community-minded businesses make it magic.
It's Prairie Grit.
Having a strong and progressive medical center like Trinity Health.
I believe Mesa really puts the magic in Minot.
We'll call to order the meeting of the Minot City Council today for Monday, March 15th, 2021. It is 5:30 in the afternoon. Just ask everyone in the audience and at the dais here to make sure that the electronic devices are either muted or put on vibrate to keep the distractions to a minimum this afternoon. Roll call, please.
Evans. Here. Dancer.
Here.
Olson. Here. Pittner.
Here.
Padragula.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Sitma.
Here. Number 2 is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda is our COVID update. I would invite Director of the 1st District Health Unit, Ms. Lisa Clute, to come forward and give us an update on how the vaccination progress and other activities that are taking place up till now. Good afternoon, Ms. Clute.
Good afternoon. Oh, and I am on. So vaccine is doing very well. Just to let you, keep you current on the cases. Within Ward County over the last 14 days, we have had 111 new cases, and our positivity rate is still below that 5%. It is at 3.2%. So that is good. The vaccination update is currently Ward County has 22.6% of the population that have received at least one vaccination. In Ward County, the 75 years and older that have received both doses now are the 70.7%, so we have exceeded the 70% there. The big movement is that in the 65 to 74-year-old age group, we have 62.6% of the population vaccinated. So those are all good numbers that we are seeing. And currently, we are in the, if you get a paycheck, if you're breathing, you can get a vaccine. That's our line now. And so currently the access points continue to be the private healthcare providers. This week at First District, we're doing second doses with Pfizer. And next week, then we will have some Moderna for first doses, possibly some Pfizer. But the healthcare facilities continue to have pretty good access to vaccine, so contact them. I know that Trinity particularly has gone down most of their list, or their high-risk patients certainly, and are getting ready almost to open up into the next phase 2. So in my meetings with all of the healthcare providers across the district, that is pretty much where we're at. So we would anticipate that that will continue to be the communication. We'll see how, as long as there's demand in this group, we won't open it up fully. But once that demand decreases, then we will to anybody. And particularly, that will impact Minot State students and so forth. So we want to get into those groups also. So that's where we're at. So we're seeing some good successes. We did hold a press conference last week. We have received a lot of phone calls regarding the vaccine, questions about the vaccine, information. So we decided we will just put the doctors on and explain the process used for the vaccine, hopefully answer some of those questions that people are having, maybe dispel some misinformation that people may have about the vaccine. That seemed to be well attended, and we've had good comments on that. So we had Dr. Wigway Dr. Mattern with sports medicine and Dr. Sather with Trinity on that, as well as Roxanne Benzel, our Director of Nursing, to explain some logistic issues to the public on how to access vaccine. We are still struggling on getting a steady stream of vaccine in here. We truly hope that by this time we would have a definite allocation coming in and that we would receive that allocation weekly. Last week we were told on Thursday one thing and on Friday we were told another thing. So it continues to be a struggle to plan for these vaccines, and thank heavens that we have good partnerships working across our healthcare providers, because we are having to move vaccine amongst ourselves to keep supplies at the various access points. That always is our goal. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clute. Just one from me. Within the statistics, do those include yet the VA or the Minot Air Force Base? I think there was also some questions on whether the pharmacies were doing all the reporting to the State Health Department. Maybe if you could shed a little light on that for us.
Yes, thank you. The Minot Air Force Base numbers that they have, or vaccines that they have provided, are not included in those percentages. I think our higher percentages that we will see impact is when we get into that working age group. I'm not as concerned about the 65 and above older age group, that data not being fairly accurate, but I am when we get into the younger. So the VA is not in that. Also, we know that at one point they had given 600 vaccinations, and that can be to any age population. The pharmacies are supposed to be registering into the North Dakota registry. So we are fairly confident that those numbers are included in this.
Thank you, Ms. Clute. Any other questions at this time? Once again, thank you for your time and the latest update on the COVID vaccination progress. Number 4 on our agenda is the City Manager Report. Mr. Harold Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Manager Report is included in the packet and is a little bit abbreviated, as I was out of the office last week relocating my wife and kids to Minot. But I did want to provide a little bit of an update as far as legislative issues this week. Things still are a little bit quiet as the legislature is awaiting revenue projections from the state, which is supposed to happen this Wednesday, the 17th. So things have been a little quiet. Action's been a little slow as they're waiting for those. But staff and the mayor are scheduled to attend several hearings this week. A lot of them are bills that we testified in the other chamber of the legislature, but now have crossed over, and so we're giving similar testimony in those situations. And we are watching those that are being amended and changing on an ongoing basis to make sure that we're providing representation from the city of Minot as those are continuing forward. So we do have several of those. After the meeting this evening, I will work on a communication to council that outlines more specifically what those bills are. So I will get those to you as well. But be happy to answer any questions the council has as far as anything from staff or regarding the city manager report.
Thank you. Any questions for our city manager?
Let me add one more thing.
Yes,
actually,
please.
since we just got done talking about COVID. And so as we entered into the next phase, as you just heard in the previous presentation, a lot of the city staff are considered essential workers, so they have been open access to be getting those vaccinations. So we'll be looking at that, and maybe hopefully the second council meeting next month, maybe we can look at if there's any changes to the mask policy for city facilities and employees specifically once they've had a few weeks to have access to those vaccinations. Again, as was previously reported, access to vaccination, I mean, they're eligible to receive it, but whether or not the vaccines are there for them to actually get those So we will monitor that and then bring that back to you as appropriate for reconsideration on that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. That takes us to our next item on our agenda, and that is the planning report. We do have a couple of public hearings included in this. However, we do have other items that are forwarded to us with past recommendations, number 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7, that can be taken either on consent or individually. What are the wishes of
Move consent on those specified items.
Motion to pass 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7 as with recommendations forward from the Planning Commission. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Anyone in the audience, the recommendations from number 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7 will be passed on in consent with recommendations from the Planning Commission unless there is any one item that someone came to speak on individually here tonight. Seeing none, any discussion on the motion from Alderman Pittner? Any discussion? Final call. Seeing none, the motion is to approve 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7 on consent as recommended. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yep.
Padula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 5.4 is a public hearing, the subdivision and zoning district change, the Shodal addition. A public hearing to consider a request from Randy Wergler for the zoning district change for Outlot 3, Section 17, Township 155 North, Range 83 West, Ward County, North Dakota. Proposed lots 1 and 2, the Shodal addition, from agricultural district to RA, agricultural residential district for Lot 1, and from AG, agricultural district to R1, single-family residential district for Lot 2. These properties are located at 4710 County Road 15 West. The recommendations, Planning Commission recommends to the City Council approve a new subdivision from Outlot 13, Section 17, Township 155 North, Range 83 West, Ward County, North Dakota, to be known as Lots 1 and 2, the Shodal addition, and 2, pass an ordinance on first reading to change the zoning from AG to RA for Lots 1 and AG to R1, single-family residential districts for Lot 2. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor or in opposition to the recommendations. Once again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come and speak either in favor or in opposition to the recommendations that are before us. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council? Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Motion from Alderman Janser to close the public hearing and pass the recommendations. Is there a second? Second. Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 5.5, a public hearing, subdivision zoning district change, future land use map amendment, the Galusha Ranch Second Edition. A public hearing to consider a request from Stacy Abel representing Ready Builders 2 LLC for a zoning district change from AG Agricultural District to RA Agricultural Residential District on the Galusha Ranch Second Edition. The proposed is located northwest of intersection of 24th Street Southeast and 43rd Avenue Southeast. Planning Commission recommendations to the council: 3, approved a new subdivision from Lot 3 Galusha Ranch addition to the city of Minot, North Dakota, and an unplatted portion of the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter, Section 6, Township 154 North, Range 82 West, Ward County, North Dakota, to be known as the Galusha Ranch Second Edition. Second recommendation is to adopt a resolution to amend the comprehensive land use map from a mix of very low-density residential and low-density residential to solely very low-density residential. And 3, pass an ordinance on first reading to change the zoning from AG to RA. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor or in opposition to the recommendations that are before the council. One more time, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor or in opposition. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Move to close the public hearing and adopt the Planning Commission recommendation.
Motion by Alderwoman Evans to close the public hearing and pass the recommendations forwarded from the Planning Council. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes, motion is approved. The last public hearing in this section is zoning ordinance text amendment, zoning supplement to the City of Minot. The Planning Commission recommends City Council pass an ordinance on first reading to amend the text of the zoning supplement to the Minot Code of Ordinances with a proposed overhaul that was presented by staff, and I believe we do have our planning director here, or rather community development director, Mr. Brian Billingsley, that has a presentation before we open the public hearing. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mayor Sitman, members of the council. I'm pleased to present to you this evening our new land development ordinance that has gone through 2 years of meetings and a public hearing before the Planning Commission earlier this month. I'd like to give you some background. Our current ordinance was adopted in July of 2013. We contracted with SRF Consulting Group out of Bismarck and Fargo on the work that was done to this ordinance. The ordinance is 285 pages long. We're renaming it the Land Development Ordinance from the zoning ordinance because it contains many more items than just a zoning ordinance would. It contains floodplain regulations, stormwater regulations, subdivision regulations, so it covers the whole gamut of land development, so we're renaming this to the Land Development Ordinance. We had 38 zoning ordinance steering committee meetings over an 18-month period. We did pause for about 4 months because of COVID last year. We did take a break when COVID first hit. And all of our meetings were posted, and the public was allowed to participate in these meetings. And we had a decent turnout. Some meetings we had nobody there. A few meetings we had a handful of people in the audience. But all of our meetings were posted, and we had. And I thought public comment was very good. We also invited the public to comment on the first draft of the ordinance during the months of December and January, and we had received 4 comments. And we forwarded those comments to the Zoning Ordinance Steering Committee, and they reviewed them, and they made changes to the ordinance where they thought it was appropriate. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on March 2nd, and they voted to recommend approval of the ordinance. I'd like to go over some of the major changes that were made to the ordinance. We overhauled the use table, our development standards, the sign code, the parking ordinance, the wireless facilities, procedures, and definitions. First up is the use table. This is what it looks like now. Before, each use table was under each zoning district. You had to go to flip around to all the different chapters to find out which uses were allowed in each zone. We now put this in one very easy table to use. Any land use with a P next to it is a permitted use that is eligible for a building permit without having to go before the Planning Commission or the City Council for approval. Any land use with a C next to it is a conditional use permit and is required to go before the Planning Commission for approval. And the categories that are blank, obviously, that use is not permitted in those zones. Our development standards now look like this. Each land use has its own standards. They're all listed. Some of them may have 1 or 2. Some may have many different standards that they must follow. We pretty much overhauled this entire section. It took us a couple of meetings to get through this one. The sign code was completely overhauled as well. We had some difficulties with interpreting the old code. We were fortunate to have several sign companies attend the meetings and provide some good input. And they shared some of the frustrations they had with the old code and interpreting in that code. So this code is much easier to interpret for them. What you see here is examples of where different types of signs are permitted by zoning district. So AG is agriculture district. There's not many signs permitted there, but in the commercial and industrial districts, you'll find more of these types of signs that are permitted. Also, our sign codes are now content neutral, meeting a Supreme Court decision that was made in 2015. We're now offering a master sign plan to larger developments, where under the old sign code, you're only allowed a certain number of signs. Now you can go beyond that if you do a master sign plan and have it submitted to the planning department for review. And we're giving staff the ability to do 10% deviations from code, meaning we can go 10% above what's required for the maximum sign height or the size of a sign or the setback of a sign if they have a legitimate hardship. That way that they would not have to go before the Planning Commission for a variance. If it goes beyond 10%, they would still have to go before the Planning Commission for a variance. Another feature you'll notice in the new ordinance are the graphics that we have. Here are some examples of some of the graphics we have, which make it much easier to interpret and understand the ordinance. The parking code. In this code, we've introduced parking maximums. That's a standard in most cities now. Or the old code just had parking minimums. Now we have parking maximums, and we're giving staff the ability to do 20% deviations on the minimums and maximums. And it would have to be approved by engineering department staff and planning staff both. If either one says it's not good, then they would have to apply for a variance and go before the Planning Commission. We also have added more variety to our parking alternatives subchapter. We now have shared parking standards in there, standalone parking standards, transportation demand parking, and demonstrated parking. So that gives staff more tools to use on sites that may not be traditional in nature and may require some special consideration. Wireless facilities, this is a chapter that was completely overhauled. We basically took a ordinance that was recently adopted by the city of Killdeer. Our consultant had worked with them. So we took that ordinance, and then what we did was we invited our airport staff along with the Air Force Base staff to attend the meeting. They were very helpful in providing us with some guidance on FAA standards because Killdeer doesn't have an airport like what we have here in Minot. So they were very helpful in adding some information to this chapter, and I'm pleased to report that it is current and up to date now. Under our procedures, we've added several of these flow charts that you'll find throughout the ordinance that should help our customers understand the procedures they have to go through. On the left is a flow chart you'll find for wireless facilities, and on the right-hand side is a flow chart for conditional uses. And I use this one on the right-hand side to inform the council that one of the major changes that's proposed in this ordinance is that the Planning Commission will have the ability to approve a conditional or interim use permit, and those types of applications would only go before the City Council if there was an appeal filed, much like a variance is handled right now. So you'll notice here through the flow chart that the applicant will visit with the Planning Department and then submit an application to the Planning Department. We'll review the application for completeness. We'll write a staff report and a recommendation, send out the public hearing notice. Then the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing and vote whether to approve or deny the application. If it's approved, there is a 10-day appeal period, 10 business day appeal period that we have to follow. If nobody files an appeal, the conditional use will be deemed approved at that point, and the applicant can apply for a building permit. If it's appealed, then it would have to go before the City Council for a vote. So you'll find in the ordinance we have all these different types of flow charts helping out our applicants with the process they have to go through. And then lastly, we've updated all of our definitions throughout the ordinance, and you'll find the graphics in here like the one you see here under building area. So all of our definitions are current and up to date to meet current industry standards. And again, there's the new ordinance is full of graphics and tables and charts that I think are going to be very helpful for our customers. The minor changes that we made, if you're a realtor or an appraiser, we did change the titles to 3 of our zoning districts. The RA district will now be called the RR district for rural residential district, since it's really mostly residential in nature, not agricultural in nature. The C3 district, which is the central business district, is going to be called CBD. And the reason for that is C connotates commercial in nature. Our downtown really is more of a mixed-use zone where we do allow residential uses downtown in addition to commercial uses. So we're going to change it from C3 to CBD. And then the M3 zone office park district is going to be called OP, Office Park District, because it's really not a manufacturing zone. M2 is our heavy manufacturing, so M3 gives the connotation that an office park district is even more intense in use than M2, and it is not. We did make a couple of minor changes to the landscaping ordinance. That ordinance was adopted by the council in 2018, so we didn't make very many changes there. Our engineering department took the lead on the flood protection and stormwater management chapters, and they handled those, and they didn't make a lot of changes, but still they're up to date to industry standards. And then we made a couple of minor modifications to non-conforming uses and non-conforming lot sizes. The areas where we didn't make any changes, we didn't make any changes to the penalty section or to the subdivision section. The committee later this, probably in the next month or two, will reconvene, and we're going to start working on the subdivision chapter. We're going to do a complete rewrite, overhaul that chapter. We needed more time. I wanted to get the zoning and the other chapters out of the way now before the construction season begins. Subdivisions can wait a few months. We're not in a hurry. Our goal, though, is to have it adopted by the fall. And before I open this for questions, in addition to thanking my staff and the consultant and my coworkers for the work that they've done, they were paid to do this work, but the people on this list received no compensation from the city other than a thank you. I thanked them at the Planning Commission meeting. I've thanked them at their zoning ordinance steering committees. But I'd like to thank all these people for the time that they spent, 38 meetings, hundreds of hours of work over the last 2 years. And without them, I don't know what kind of ordinance we would have today, but the input they provided was excellent. They looked out for the best interests of Minot, and I appreciate their efforts, and I want to acknowledge them and thank them for volunteering their time towards our city. So with that, I stand available for your questions. I ask for your approval, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Billingsley, and I appreciate the last slide here. I only sat within that subcommittee for a short amount of time, and Alderman Ross and former Alderman Walski, I know, is no easy task with a lot of those meetings, so thank you, and even more so to the rest of the folks that are outlined here. I saw Raleigh that was here and a couple of other folks that participated this on a regular basis, so I appreciate your time. And staff, it's no easy task. As we've mentioned before, 2012, we saw the pendulum swing very far to one side, and it's great to see not only the update, but I think just the easy read graphics that we see now incorporated a lot more other very large municipal publications just to make things a little bit easier to understand. So I greatly appreciate all of that work, Brian, and all staff from all departments that contributed. I don't have any questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Billingsley from the presentation or from anything that was submitted? Woman Evans.
I don't have a question, but I would like to just read the highlights of one of the steering committee members, Mr. Bowman, who wasn't able to attend tonight, and his thoughts participating on the steering committee. Over the past 2 years, I observed and helped with full review of this document. The process was thorough and professional, and I believe that the City of Minot is well suited for this revised document. In particular, I believe that it removes barriers to development and redevelopment in our community without sacrificing safety, aesthetics, and the use of best common practices in the development process. This text amendment anticipates current trends in the economy and positions Minot well to take advantage of future investment opportunities. I am also pleased with the graphics and tables that are used to make this document more user-friendly. Committee members were able to work together to find common ground on a variety of issues. Input was also sought from professionals in government, building, development, industry, and community development to ensure that this document would be applicable and helpful immediately. Our committee approval was unanimous, as was its approval at the Planning Commission. He also would like to take this time to commend Mr. Billingsley for his leadership and hard work on this project, and I'd like to second that. All of the city staff who were involved, including Peter Baumgarter, Glenda Sorensen, and John Van Dyke. They were professional, efficient, and effective in their roles. It was a pleasure to see them work, and our community should be proud of them. So I just want to share that with folks, and I had an extensive conversation with Mr. Bowman, and I am very happy with this rewrite, and as somebody's working on the county's rewrite, I know what a process it is, and the end product is beautiful. I mean, it really will. It is, as Mr. Bowman said, the right document for Minot, and I couldn't be, more in agreement with that. So thank you and your staff and all of the committee members who selflessly, gave and showed what public service really means in our community.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Alderman Ross.
Just to echo everybody else, I mean, I got on this committee relatively late in the game, but I got to take part in the process and to watch the process and watch the public input, the comments, having the professionals come in and provide their input, and really what I guess what impresses me about this document is that it really makes Minot a business-friendly community. It gives us, I think it gives us one or two steps ahead when it comes to competing for other communities in attracting business to Minot. And I appreciate everybody on the committee who provided input and who worked so very hard. I mean, it was tedious, to say the least. So, Brian, kudos to you and everybody else on the committee. But what an eye-opening experience it was for a new alderman to take part in. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions for Community Development Director? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Once again, this is a public hearing. We'll open this up now for any comments from anyone who is in the audience, for folks that are in support or in opposition to the recommendation. Your name and just your city of residence for the record, sir.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Raleigh Ackerman. I was vice chair of the steering committee. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your patience over these years of sticking with us and developing this ordinance. As Alderman Ross would have said, it was quite a process and at times rather tedious. But with the amount of input that we got, there again, I can echo his thoughts and what he had to say about the. I think we stand above other cities, other communities, and where we're at today. One thing that there are a couple of things that I'd like to mention is the accomplishments that were in that document, and it made a more efficient, lessen the time it takes to process and also get to the development in this whole process. Obviously, if we're getting more efficient, we're going to save tax dollars money, developers money, and along with that, another concern was at the time was to protect the property rights of the previous zones. Obviously, we renamed a bunch of zones, and in this whole process, we eliminated some zones, but it was very important to the whole process of preserving those rights. I'm going to say this, and for Alderman Janzer, who has put up with this for all these years, this is a living document. I said this probably in 2010 or 11, actually is when we first started this thing. And with that, for examples, is methadone clinics, medical marijuana, those types of things that pop up that you'll have to address in the future, with land ordinance changes. So it's never done. It's just it just continues. So I thank you for that. One last thing that I'd like to share is that this document will eventually become linked to everything else in city government. So if you go onto the document, there will be a link there, and it will take you right to other entities or other documents that you have to be able to, rather than looking up and making phone calls, there will be that link that'll bring you to the new software that Emily's been working on for a number of years. So with that, I'd certainly support this. I would appreciate your vote, and thank you for the opportunity to serve on this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Any questions for Mr. Ackerman while he's at the podium? Thank you, sir. Once again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor or in opposition to the recommendations. Seeing none, What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I
Alderman
move
Ross.
we close the public hearing and approve the recommendation.
Motion by Alderman Ross to close the public hearing and approve the recommendation.
Second?
Second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion from the council? Any discussion? Final call. Seeing none, motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans. Yes. Janser,
Yes.
Olson. Yes. Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to Section 7 of our agenda for this evening. Action items.
6.
Did I miss one?
Consent.
Consent?
I'm sorry, I did skip right over consent here. We do have a number of consent items on our agenda here. 6.1 through 6.14, are there any individual items within our consent agenda that need to be pulled for individual discussion? I'd look to the audience if there's any one item within the different 14 that are in consent that need to be pulled for individual discussion. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mayor, I move consent on all items.
Motion by Alderman Pittner, consent to approve as recommended on all items, second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans. Janser,
Yes.
Olson. Yes.
Motion is approved. Now we can move on to our next section. This is the action items. 7.1 is concur on purchase price for flood buyout at number 16, 8th Street Northeast for $178,800. City of Minot policy and procedures for involuntary acquisition include a provision that any negotiation purchase price for flood buyouts under these guidelines, where the purchase agreement exceeds 15% and $15,000 from the initial purchase price offer made by the city, shall go to the city council for closing before a closing can take place. The independent appraised value originally set for this property was $148,000, which per federal requirement was the initial offer made to the property owner. As a result of the successful negotiations with the property owner in this matter, we've reached an agreement on the purchase price of $178,800, which is below the cap to meet HUD's requirement of the necessary and reasonable cost. Recommendation to City Council is to concur with the negotiated price of $178,800 for flood buyout acquisition at number 16, 8th Northeast, owned by John Irene Pittner. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson, second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Final call. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson. Yes. Pittner,
Abstain.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.2 is approved resolution authorizing court action to enforce purchase agreement with Palmer Miller. City of Minot entered into a purchase agreement with Palmer Miller on October 31st, 2018 to acquire his property at 105 6th Street Northeast. Since Mr. Miller signed the agreement, he has made numerous requests for delaying closing on the property. Far more than sufficient time has been granted to Mr. Miller to locate a new home, and based on recent communications, there is no evidence that he plans to honor the purchase agreement anytime soon. Authorization of this resolution will result in Mr. Warkup seeking through court action to enforce the purchase agreement by closing on the property. The recommendations to council tonight is to approve the resolution authorizing city's special counsel John A. Warkup to commence legal action to enforce the purchase agreement with Palmer Miller.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Last call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans. Janser,
Yes.
Olson. Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.3 is approved termination agreement with Lighthouse Management Group Incorporated. City of Minot entered into 2 subrecipient agreements with Lutheran Social Services Housing Incorporated, with one to construct and operate a 6-unit family homeless shelter and the other to construct 17 units of LMI rental apartments known as Broadway Circle, with both projects located on the same site with the physical address of 1901 South Broadway. On January 15th, 2021, Lutheran Social Services North Dakota, which includes its subsidiary Lutheran Social Service Housing, LSSH, ceased all operations effective immediately. This decision includes stopping all work on the Broadway Circle project. Lutheran Social Service has agreed to convey the property to the City of Minot, which will assure the city's compliance with HUD requirements, as well as afford the opportunity for the city to ensure the planned project can be completed. The recommendations to the City Council is to approve the termination agreement with Lighthouse Management, closing out the 2 subrecipient agreements with Lutheran Social Service Housing Incorporated, and convey 1901 South Broadway to the City of Minot.
Move approval of the termination agreement.
Motion to approve the agreement by Alderwoman Evans. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Alderman Pittner.
Question for Mr. Zakian. And John, I'll ask this while you're approaching the podium. After this, the City of Minot will in effect have possession of the property on Broadway?
Mayor Sitmet, Alderman Pittner, yes.
Continue.
And there's a question in here, John, and I'm just going to kind of give my thoughts to the council. This is where I view this as an opportunity. We have the extension from HUD. I would like to see the City of Minot maybe explore a different site for the homeless shelter, family homeless shelter. I'm not against the project. I actually fully supportive of the project, but from the time that we bought this property in, I believe it was 2019, interest rates are at an all-time low. Maybe this property, prime real estate on Broadway, may be desirable by a developer to come in, and maybe we could find a more pedestrian-friendly location to serve for the family homeless shelter, not on the southern corridor of Broadway, one of the busier intersections of Minot, with the closest crosswalk being, I believe, 3 blocks away to the north on 16th Avenue. I just think, not necessarily a motion, if it needs to be in that form, I'll make it. But if we can provide directive to staff to maybe look for another location, and if we can unload this site and maybe see that site developed, I think it could be beneficial to the City of Minot and come out on top with a better pedestrian-friendly location. Need not remind you, just I believe it was last year, a young man lost his life crossing Broadway just a block or two to the north. Lack of a controlled intersection, I think, is possibly a safety hazard, especially with most of the essential services, banks, grocery stores, on the western side, opposite where this proposed site is located. I just think it would be a worthwhile. Maybe in the end, this site, we move forward. We have the extension. Let's take a look. That would be my thought. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that or questions for me. And if John, if that's a possibility, maybe that's my question. Maybe I finally got there. Is that a possibility for the city at this point?
Mayor Sitman, Alderman Pittner. Let me first offer this, and then I'll answer that question. Assuming you approve this, there are a couple of steps that have to be taken by Lighthouse Management before we can actually execute this, because it's in receivership. Once we get ownership of the property, I am going to have to come back to you. All this is accomplishing right now is we get ownership back of the property, which keeps us in compliance with HUD. So this kind of discussion, either up or down or forward or sideways, is something we can definitely have at the next step. Just for clarification purposes, because I always believe in trying to answer all your questions as best I can. Once we regain control of this site, if we were able to sell this property for a price that recovers all costs incurred to date for, or will be incurred for, the family homeless shelter, that would be an option for you to consider. However, if we were to attempt to sell this site and could not, as a result of that sale, recover all the money that we had shelled out, then that's not eligible. And I do, and again, for the sake of transparency, I do want to point out, and I know a number of you have talked to me about this, there are some companies, entities that are owed money that incurred costs on this project. We have had extensive discussions with Lighthouse Management. They have been very cooperative and forthright in that information. The companies that we have been made aware of, it is evident that they did do work on this project. We do not have an obligation to pay them. However, it would get really messy if we didn't make a good faith effort to pay them once we regain control of the site. If we do move forward and pay them for the work they did, then the cost we have to recover from this site goes up about another $350,000 to $400,000. So we're currently at $1,345,000. The estimate we have been given by Lighthouse Management as to those entities that did work clearly connected to this site is about another $350,000 to $400,000. So if we were to consider an option, as Alderman Pittner had suggested, all I wanted to make sure you were aware of is that we'd have to sell the property for that total amount of money in order to be able to proceed to an alternate site.
Continue, Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. And John, I'm well aware of that. I'm not asking for taxpayers or the city to take a bath or take a loss on it, but if we can break even and get this in, or maybe even make a little bit of money and get to a more pedestrian-friendly site for a family homeless shelter, I think it's a worthwhile thing to look at, especially with the extension that we got on these dollars from HUD. I'd be remissful to move forward just blindly with this project and not have, maybe just had the conversation if there's interest in this site and if there's a possible other one. My thoughts, just providing that, and I would like to see that explored.
And perhaps one of the avenues might be, as we are moving forward with it, Mr. Zakian, is take a look at what the potential appraised value might be so we get an idea if that could be a reality. Sure. Any other potential sites. My own tenure with this, and I think most of us can attest to this, the NIMBY issue with these is always significant, not in my backyard. So with that in mind, I'll absolutely approve moving forward with this tonight and look forward to any information coming back and what might be possible down the road.
Well, and along those lines, Mayor Sitman, to further pick up on what Alderman Pittner has said, the next time I will have no choice but to come back to you, although I would anyway, but I have no choice. I will come back to you at that time with a cost certain. I will be able to have the current appraised value, but by that time when I come back, I will know all the vendors that legitimately need to be paid, so I'll have an exact dollar value. So I'll be able to tell you exactly how much NDR money we're going to lay out for this and how much we are possibly going to get back. So yes, I can do that.
Sounds good. Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this is maybe kind of a comment and a question for Mr. Zakian. You know, I'm not necessarily against the suggestion by Alderman Pittner that we keep our options open or look at a potential different approach to this. However, I'm also thinking about how long it took us to get to this point with Lutheran Social Services. I believe we had this family shelter project out in an RFP multiple times before they got to the point where they figured out a way that projected that with the commercial property that was in play here, as well as the low-income apartments that were to be built and the family shelter, that all kind of worked together. And I would be concerned if we look at trying to just make money on this piece of property or move this thing if it gets folks who might be interested in sort of taking it on the way it was set up to walk away. And so I guess that's the where I get to the question is, John, do you know of or have you had contact with, or, are there potentially people who would, once we get to where we can do it, meaning we have possession of the property and so forth, that would be interested in getting into this in kind of the same structure that Lutheran Social Services envisioned it?
Mayor Simmer, Alderman Janser, I'm aware of 3 nonprofit entities that have expressed a serious interest in this. I have had discussions with 2 of them. I know others have had discussions with the 3rd. The message I have given to all 3, 2 directly, 1 indirectly, is that we cannot have any specific discussions or make any representations until we own the property. Once we own the property, at that time, we can commence discussions with any and all nonprofits. And again, the goal, very briefly, because Alderman Janser does recollect correctly, there were several attempts to find a project developer through an RFP process. That did not work. However, the subrecipient process, which means working with 1 or more nonprofits where you don't have to do a bid or an RFP, you can just work with them and work out an arrangement that is acceptable to our goals and acceptable to the HUD rules and proceed. And that's how we ended up working through this process and got Lutheran Social Services housing. That is a process we can do again. But again, as I've shared with you regarding Alderman Pittner's suggestion, the same thing with the point raised by Alderman Janser is that, yes, we can, but not until we own the property. And I am aware of at least 3 nonprofit entities that have expressed serious interest.
Thank you.
Alderman Pittner.
And again, I just want to make sure my thought on proposing this idea is clear, that I'm not my ultimate goal with this is to improve or enhance the location and the project. My concern, and if we can make a little bit of money or break even with this site at the end, hey, good deal. My ultimate goal is to make sure that this is put in the best, most residentially and pedestrian-friendly site. I can't remember the news articles that cited even saying that you're going to see a lot of people, a lot of families with a single car, you're going to see a lot of walkability and pedestrians trying to utilize walking paths and stuff like that in the article. I can't recall it, which it was or when it was, but again, that's part of it. We're going to have people that are walking to the site to and from this building and this project. So if we can improve the location and the safety and all of that with finding a new location, that's my primary goal with this. Yeah, if we make a little bit of money, great. If we break even, great. So I just want to make sure those are my intentions with this, and I would never be in favor of selling this site or getting rid of the site unless we had another site secured and able to move forward with that. Just want to make sure that that's clear.
Further questions for Mr. Zakian? Alderman Patagula.
Again, not so much a question, but kind of expressing an opinion. I think what Mark said would pretty much be what I would say. As for the pedestrian safety aspect, we're doing a traffic study for all of South Broadway, and I think that will hopefully illuminate some of the problems that pedestrians have for a whole length of street, and hopefully there'll be some solutions for that. I personally think that we need to get moving with this. As it is, it's a moot point until we obtain full title and pay off who's owed money. My thoughts would be to stick with it as it is. There's significant needs in the community. There's so many projects that we could always, fine tune some more further. But I think this is a good deal as it was. I feel very badly that Lutheran Social Services had to close, and we had to put a stop to what we were doing. But I would prefer it if we kept going as much as we could.
Alderman Ross.
Not a question, but a statement. For those reasons, from Alderman Pittner and more, I'm in support of this. I'm in support of approving this, but I would also second a motion if you're willing to make a resolution to look into our options moving forward to find a more, in my opinion, suitable, aesthetically suitable and safer place for a operation like this. So I'll vote to approve, but I would also ask if you want to make a recommendation or a resolution after this. I would certainly second that and add for discussion. Thank you.
The appropriate time would likely be at the next presentation after all of those numbers and information comes forward within that time frame. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with everyone's comments here. I'm going to support this tonight, no question. But again, Alderman Patrigola pointed out, I've sat on some of the meetings with a corridor study for Broadway and the safety, walkability, pedestrian friendliness. I guarantee you that, and I shouldn't say guarantee, I'm not an engineer, but I would like to bet that the safety would be a higher, there would be more risk and safety issues if we put a residential area and a residential housing right on Broadway with no crosswalks within 3 blocks to walk to the grocery store across the street. I think we've all been witness to someone trying to play Frogger as they jump across Broadway at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock, and sometimes in the evening. So again, that's where this idea is coming from. Just want to put it out there, but I will support this evening.
Any other questions for Mr. Zakian? Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Zakin, as I understand it, this is still subject to approval by court because it's in receivership, right? So the action tonight doesn't necessarily make this property of the city transfer ownership. It's still subject to approval by the courts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Zakian? Thank you, John. Any further discussion on the motion to approve? Any further discussion? Alderman Janser.
One thing occurs to me, and that is, based on what Mr. Zakian said about approval by the court and what City Manager Stewart just pointed out, is even though we approve this tonight, could not the court or if in fact they felt that there was money to be made by putting this property on the market to better satisfy the debts of Lutheran Social Services, is that an option for them?
Mr. City Manager.
John may be able to answer this more fully, but if I mess this up, John, feel free to correct me. But my understanding is, yes, the courts could make that decision, but in the process of making the decision about whether or not to sell it or transfer ownership to the city, that due diligence has already been done, and they felt it appropriate to move forward of transferring ownership to the city, which I think will go back to the issue of the appraisal. I would assume that if there was more money to be recouped through the sale of the property, LSS probably would have taken that route as opposed to transferring ownership to us. So I think that mountain becomes a little bit higher to climb when you add on paying the bills. But until we go through the assessment, that's going to be hard to determine. But I'll leave it to Mr. Zakian to answer anything I missed.
Mayor Sitma, you were right on. I'll just add a little more because it is a good question. Actually, Lighthouse Management, the receiver taking over for Lutheran Social Services, we gave them 2 options. One option was give us the money and then you can own the property, clear, we will make no claims on it and go ahead and try and sell it, or convey the property back to us. I will tell you that and this is we're in to some extent uncharted territory. This is a very rare occurrence. For a nonprofit, it's not for for-profits. There have been a number of defaults with for-profit developers, but nonprofits by its nature usually don't default. They did the due diligence, they went through it, and they came back, and again, were very forthright with us. They felt it wasn't worth the risk involved in raising the cash necessary to pay us back the amount of $1,345,000. And therefore, they elected to go the second route, which is to convey the property back to us. Again, as the city manager noted, we can't glean what the court is going to rule, but Lighthouse Management is going to make all this clear to them in the process. And the other overarching issue, I know I probably say this too much, but my primary concern is twofold. One is to make sure all these projects, as envisioned in the action plan, proceed. But equally important is to protect this city and its finances from any non-compliance issues that come with these funds. Were the court to make a decision adverse and not allow this to proceed, we are still in compliance because we have made a significant effort to get this property back after a situation occurred that we had no control over. But I'm very optimistic this is going to go forward. But it is a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zakian. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Evans? Yes. Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes. Motion is approved. That takes us to number 8, personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda this evening. One more time, call for personal appearances, an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. Seeing none, we will move on to the miscellaneous and discussion items. 9.1 is our library annual report. Miss Janet Anderson, our department head that is in charge of everything that goes on across the street, is here for the 2020 COVID-laden annual report. Janet, thanks so much for having this for us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I should first congratulate us all on surviving a year of COVID-19. It was a year ago today that North Dakota schools closed to face-to-face public education, and a year ago today that the library made the decision to close. The very next day, on March 16th, 2020, I gave my last annual report to City Council, and I believe it was a rather long meeting, so I thank you for making this one briefer. The Minot Public Library building closed to the public on March 16th, and we were closed for 84 consecutive days. Wow. On March 16th, we started curbside services, started offering virtual programs, and offered take-and-make kits for children and eventually for all ages. We were the only North Dakota library that served a population of more than 20,000 to have these services in place within 24 hours. For that, I'm very, very proud of our staff and everyone who helped make this happen. So, in the meantime, we were forced to kind of quickly change gears as pretty much all of our major programs, projects, and priorities switched so that we could assist people in this pandemic. During this time, we began offering digital library cards. We offered curbside printing, where we would print something for someone and run it out to them. People could check out Chromebooks. We offered online recommendations. We spearheaded a community-wide grocery delivery program, continued sharing updated information on COVID-19, and we began just some other circulations. So we expanded our tool library, started checking out STEM kits for children, extended our DVD checkout period, and by the way, almost finished our exterior workshop, our exterior work, which is almost done, very, very close. So not surprisingly, digital books became really popular in 2020. So I have a little graph here, but basically we circulated about 10,000 more digital titles. That's audiobooks, ebooks, and also streaming videos. Some highlights from the last year: we did say goodbye to our children's librarian, Paulette Nelson, after 40 years. we were forced to have a drive-through retirement party. So some of these pictures on the right, we had hundreds of people drive through to say goodbye to Miss Paulette, but we are still planning an in-person event soon. Someday. We also gave away 256 Lego kits one day in November, and anyone, even if you didn't receive the kits, was able to enter a picture of their own Lego creation to be entered in a drawing to win a grand prize. So this lovely young lady here won our grand prize. We started two-color 3D printing, which that out of this world is actually a 3D print with two colors. And meanwhile, our teen librarian made dozens of 3D printed masks for first responders. Along the lines, we also found out that in 2019, we were named a future-focused library, meaning that we are future-focused. We're one of 3 in the entire state to get that. Though a lot of things changed, some things never change. We still issue library cards, more than 1,387 new library cards issued in 2020. That picture there is my friend Kaylin. She was so excited to get her library card with her 2 sisters. We also continued to check out items. They were not as much as 2019, but we still checked out a lot of items, more than 100,000 items. We continued our summer reading program, though we did no in-person programming. It was all digital, with the exception of a very fun day at one of the schools that gave us a chance to do kind of a water gun experience, which was a great way to run off some energy. So we had over 466 people participate in our summer reading program. So a lot of that stayed the same. But things also looked a lot different. More programs were hosted on Facebook, Zoom, and YouTube than in person. Over on the side, you'll see that we had 168 in-person programs, but 197 virtual programs. We also did Take and Make, which was where people could come and pick up projects at the library and then take them home and follow along with a tutorial online. Almost 3,000 items were given away. Funding for these kits was entirely provided by the Friends of the Library or through grants we received, including from Humanities North Dakota. To the right there is a picture of our outside pickup box that our maintenance supervisor created so that we could have these available 24/7. We also offered a winter reading program for the first time. So that was our sweater weather reading challenge. It's still going on through the end of the month. Not quite as popular as our summer reading, but almost 200 people participated. And of course, once we did reopen, things did look a little different. We have masks, we have a lot of spacing and barriers in place. One of the biggest struggles was how we can be social while maintaining social distance. So we relied really heavily on our social media. Facebook still tends to be our primary platform, and we increased our engagement on Facebook by 31% in 2020. In addition, we've increased our Instagram followers, and we're now on TikTok and Animal Crossing. We have a little graph down here showing our Facebook traffic. Virtual programs included everything from story times to this one below is coming up this week. I think our teen librarian is doing a virtual kitchen. She does at least once a month where she shows teens how to make something. This week will be omelets. The thing that I want to point out, and I just need to give a shout out to our staff, is it's not just sitting in front of a camera and reading a story. Especially when it came to story times, we had to get permission from publishers. We had to acknowledge the publishers. There were certain regulations within that. So it's not just reading a story online. As far as these Take and Make programs, we had staff putting together dozens and dozens of these things to be picked up. So it seems really easy because they work so hard, but it really is quite a bit of work. So what was the value of your library in 2020? It was definitely a different year. As I said, we checked out fewer items. We provided a lot more of other services. In 2020, we spent just over $2 million, but the services we provided, if you were to tally them all up from a paid service similar, were over $7.5 million. So for every $1 that we spent, we provided $3.71 in service. take that by population, that's $162 of service value per person in the city of Minot. So we continue to be very proud of this. We want people to know that no matter what is happening, we are here for them, and that the services we provide are free services to assist our community. So what's next? Our library staff are hard at work at updating our strategic plan, and we'll have that this year. We've also taken on a new task of a diversity audit. So to ensure that our collection, our books primarily, are inclusive and have a wide variety of representation, our staff are meticulously going through title by title to document what we have and see where we might be lacking. We also hope to do a space analysis in 2021. Our building, which was originally built in 1966, was expanded in 2001. Things have changed a lot. We didn't have a tool library in 2001. We didn't have a lot of the things we have, board games, donations coming in. Space is starting to become an issue, so we're going to take a really hard look at that. Also, we're going to be looking at staffing as new tasks continue to be developed, whether that's virtual programming or diversity audits. We're realizing we may need to readjust some of our job descriptions. And then finally, collaboration. The Minot Public Library exists to assist others. We're not in the business of competition. We are here to collaborate. So we're going to work even harder this year to reach out and work with businesses and other organizations to find out how we can help them have a successful 2021 and beyond. And that is all I have. I thank you for your time.
Janet, thank you so much. Through all of COVID, there were so many things that went on. You did miss one item in your presentation. The folks at the library also did a tremendous amount during the early stages of COVID when everyone was trying to figure out what was going on, where could we go safely, and how could we do it. Folks were trying to figure out how to have groceries delivered. And staff at Minot Public Library stepped up in a very big way, helping coordinate that effort for a lot of folks. And you probably have more information on what that all took, but I want to say just outstanding job stepping up to the plate. I know a lot of staff really reached out into a lot of other areas, but I remember this one specific from the library is I had several calls from pastors and others as we were trying to coordinate things as things evolve. So if you wouldn't mind, just elaborate a little bit on that for me.
Yes, I was fortunate, thank you, Mayor, to be included in the COVID task force. And one area where we saw some need was that as people were not able to leave their homes, they still needed essentials brought to them. They still needed that. So with the help of some other entities, including Independence, Inc. and South Valley United Way, as well as the JIC, and some technology support from Derek Hackett, we were able to set up an online form where people could go and place their orders online through Marketplace or Walmart or Cashwise and submit a form, which then the email goes to me, and I find a volunteer to go pick up those groceries and deliver it to them. It was, I think the intentions were great. It was wonderful to be able to help people with that, and it's something that we haven't stopped it, so it's still available to people.
Outstanding. Very well done on that, Janet, and I hope we memorialize that as well within our emergency response plan as we work our way towards post-COVID in the near future. But things like that we can't forget because that really was impactful and a service that I don't know too many other libraries or folks that step into that. So outstanding. Any questions for our library director? Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That takes us to number 10. This is liaison reports. Alderman Padragula.
Not a whole lot to report on. I'll leave the County Planning Commission story to Alderwoman Evans. Did attend the Commission on Aging meeting. They're plugging along. The Emergency Resource Council had a very interesting presentation by the Fire Department Regional disaster, terrorism, et cetera, response team. And probably should ask them to send it to all of us so we're aware of what they do. But it's funded by the Homeland Security people, and we serve as a resource for major disasters and very technical kinds of rescue and chemical spill and those kinds of operations for the entire northwest quadrant of the state. And it's really amazing what training our staff is getting and the skills they can bring to an incident anywhere in the northwestern part of the state. Lots of state-of-the-art equipment. We approved purchasing some training equipment tonight. All sorts of really, really neat stuff. And I'm old enough to remember, in particular when it comes to things like trench rescue, where in the old days, if a trench fell in on you, it was not good news. And now they have very sophisticated techniques and tools to shore up sides of trenches, to shore up buildings through which cars have gone. They do that 2 or 3 times a year when there's an accident. So it's a really different world now in terms of coming to the rescue of people compared to what it was some years ago. And again, thankfully funded by the federal government. And very, very high level of training, very sophisticated technology, and I think above all, very courageous and selfless kind of work by our firefighters. So that was very, very good to hear about, and I sent a note of compliment to the people who presented and to our fire chief, and very, very nice to know that that's available. So that was some really good news to hear.
Thank you, Alderman Patagula. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you. I'll see if I clear my throat a little bit. One project that I have been active in and have reported on several times is the progression of our CTE. It's slower than I want. I'll openly admit that, but we are moving in the right direction. But out of that have come some other opportunities or potential opportunities for this CTE project in Minot. So I've been working with a group that has been testifying before the legislature requesting some additional CTE funds that could, with a collaborative effort with Minot Public Schools and Dakota College at Bottineau, create even more opportunities for a CTE. So I'm excited about that. I'll report on the progression with that as well, but I'm hopeful that we can have a really nice center available for people in Minot in the not too distant future. And then just coming up, I will be the City Council liaison on the City Hall Building Committee. I know that was brought up at our last meeting, and we certainly want input from everyone up on the dais, but I will be joining the committee beginning tomorrow, and we'll start discussing what our City Hall will be like in downtown Minot. So that's everything.
Thank you, Alderwoman Olson. Alderwoman Evans.
Well, Director Anderson, gave a good update on the library. Just wanted to let folks know that regular hours resumed at the library on March 1st, so that was a huge step forward. So that is good. No Sundays. They decided to just keep continuity because we're not open Sundays in the summer. So, but we're back to normal hours there, so that is great. Ward County Planning, as Mr. Billingsley said, their city planning hadn't been rewritten, the zoning, for 8 years. We'll try a couple decades for Ward County, and we are still doing the monumental task of rewriting the zoning ordinance with our fellow commissioners on the Planning Commission for Ward County, a document that hasn't been revised in decades. So it continues to be very challenging, but enlightening. It is going to be an incredible document when it's done that will be much more useful, I think, for the county and people doing business and development in the county. But it is, as Alderman Ross said, sometimes very tedious and eye-opening. But we will, we're on progress to get this done, hopefully in 2021. Just like the city zoning changes, there will be public hearings and opportunities for public input. So that will be coming up soon. But yeah, me and Alderman Padragula continue to plug away.
Thank you, Alderwoman Evans. I did have a couple different committee meetings as well. Chamber EDC had discussions on the contract that is expected to come in early April, as well as some other project discussions on how the Chamber EDC is looking at its own future and what that's going to look like. So I would expect more of that information and conversation to be coming forward. This morning we did have a Ward County Weed Board meeting, and that was out at the new location for the County Highway Department in the old Halliburton location. If you know where Dusk to Dawn is, taking that road and just continuing to the north within that facility, and discussing how the County Weed Board and its activities are going to evolve as that location changes, but also really the part that's played in Minot too. As we do have a significant challenge, as I think many of us are aware of noxious weeds and the challenges that we addressed in some of those former special committees that were drawn up. But of course, the river is always a main component of that, as well as undeveloped lots. And then Task Force 21, we also did meet again, talking about Global Strike Command, the effort for continued support for Minot Air Force Base as some of the projects moving forward, Minot being as good as we are, kind of fell at the bottom of the list for the re-engineering of the bombers, and then also the Minuteman III missiles that are going to be changed out. But we're very hopeful that post-COVID that we can start having those in-person conversations, that a lot of the members continue to grow those relationships and continue to grow the support out there, not only within the elected community, but those that are in the highest ranking offices within the United States Air Force and beyond. So those were my activities. Alderman Ross.
Nothing to report.
Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last Thursday, all afternoon, I participated in a meeting of the Broadway Corridor Study Group. And so I think this is something that we will want to be aware of and involved in as we go forward. When you look at Broadway, because it's a U.S. highway and because there is likely to be increasing traffic over time as the community grows and so forth. There are some probable changes that need to be addressed with that corridor to make sure that the traffic can move efficiently and effectively. And so there's a great deal of engineering effort that is going into this. There will be public input requested before too long. Up to this point, the initial public input on some of the issues was done virtually, but going forward, I hope that later this year, some of that can maybe be done in person the way it had been done previous to COVID, and we'll get an opportunity to look at what has been developed and help guide how that is handled moving forward. So stay tuned for more on that. Other than that, the City County Public School Parks Liaison Committee did not meet, so I have nothing to report from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Janser. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. The Renaissance Review Board, Zone Review Board did not meet in February, but we are meeting this week. We'll be discussing policy changes, possible policy changes by staff and through public comment. And then the other committee I sit on is the Visit Minot CVB. All I can say is that they're working very hard to coordinate and prepare for the Women's National ASHA Women's Tournament that'll be hosted in Minot, and working very diligently on collaborating with a multitude of other organizations to bring other events to Minot, and really working on the project that we approved here at council. So very exciting stuff going on over at Visit Minot.
All right. Thank you, Alderman Pittner. That takes us to number 11, adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Pittner.
I thought Tom was going to do this. I'd just like to congratulate our Minot High men's basketball team who represented Minot very, very well in the state championships yesterday afternoon. including Tom's son, Michael, who had a tremendous tournament as well as our other Magi. They didn't bring home the state championship, but they brought home an amazing season of hard work and made us all proud yesterday in Bismarck. And, even though I'm a Lion, go Magi.
Very well said.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Ross.
I just can't, thank you for saying that. I was kind of hesitant. But one thing I do want to say is that even the Magi swim team, our Redeemers basketball team, both boys and girls, Bishop Ryan, all the local sports, being down at the state tournament this weekend with the Minot High basketball team, two things were very, very evident to me. We need local sports. We need youth sports. After this last year in COVID, seeing the Minot High student section down there and the way they represented our community it gave me chills. But also what gave me chills was the fact of the community support. The Facebook messages, the text messages, the businesses stepping up to support these young men. You talk about the magic in Minot. That was it. And proud of those kids. But I'm really proud of Minot. I'm proud of the students. I'm proud of the way Magic City campus and all of our local athletes, how they represent our community. And I'm glad sports are back in the city of Minot. Thank you.
And lastly, Alderman Ross and everyone else, Class B. It's this weekend, right?
Yes.
So there's another opportunity to catch some awesome basketball and local sports at the MSU Dome. So, motion by Alderman Pittner to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Evans. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.